All right, let's get to Ed Yeranian. Ed Yeranian, veteran CBS correspondent and a veteran member of America's Voice of America and a longtime member of the John Fredericks Radio Network. Ed, great to have you with us. You're on the John Fredericks Show. Ed, live in Cairo, Egypt today. Ed, what is the media saying out there?
I think it's mostly outrage at the Turkish president's invasion of Syria. That's what the Arab League said. Most of the foreign ministers condemned the Turkish incursion, invasion, whatever you want to call it, into northern Syria. They called on the UN to get Turkey to pull out again. And the man in the street is very angry. I mean, just talking to ordinary people who don't usually get upset about such things, I was a bit impressed to see the anger at the Turkish president and the move he made into Syria. As for Trump, I don't really notice anyone expressing anger at Trump for deciding to pull U.S. troops out.
Ed, you're in Cairo. I'm in D.C. The outrage in Washington, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it's beyond the impeachment hearings and everything else. It's both sides absolutely going crazy over the fact that we're not, engaging. I don't know what they expected the U.S. to do, engage in a war with Turkey, our NATO ally. And we're the other NATO allies here. Why don't they, if Germany is so upset about this, why don't they send, 10,000 troops in there?
I think a lot of the outrage is the usual media barking on cue at a political move that doesn't fit someone's agenda or doesn't fit their narrative. There seems to be an agenda, and I say this after watching the Middle East for 32 years. I've been out here for 32 years now. There seems to be an effort on the part of Western powers, the U.S. In the lead, I guess, to break up countries that they don't like. Syria is one of them. Iraq was one of them. They tried it. They tried in Libya. They succeeded. At least that's what it seems. They broke up Sudan. They tried in Egypt and failed. They tried I'm trying to think where else. In Yemen, they seem to have succeeded. And it's not for the reasons they say. I mean, they're always talking about human rights. They bark about people being put into jail, and then when lots of people get killed, they really don't say much of anything. It's really not that. I think it's an agenda. I think they're trying to break up Arab countries. It seems to fit the pattern. Syria was one of them, and now that President Trump has done something that would seem to be putting Syria back together again, they're upset. And the Israelis, above all, I've noticed on Twitter that the most outrage seems to be coming from the Israelis, because the Israelis were banking on an independent Kurdistan. We saw that in the Iraqi Kurdistan. They were upset when the Iraqi government reasserted its power over Erbil and what appeared to be the Kurdish move for independence in northern Iraq. And now they're irate that President Trump has decided to pull out of northern Syria. Why do they want to have northern Syria? Why do they want the Kurds to be an independent entity? Well, I guess the Israelis don't like President Assad. They don't like Iran on their border. And this is just one move to weaken both Iran and Assad and the U.S. Well, of course, the U.S. Does pretty much what many Israel supporters like to see us do.
All right, so what is it that the Israelis want? They want the U.S. staying in Syria to what? Protect the Kurds so that the Kurds can have their own territory and launch their own country in direct opposition to one of our NATO allies? I mean, what is it that they want?
Well, Israel is on bad terms with Turkey and Erdogan. They didn't used to be, but in recent years they've been. And they would like to see, they haven't said it specifically, but from their analysts and their commentators and everything they post on Twitter, you can see that they would like to see an independent Kurdistan in the north of Syria. And I think many, not just Israelis, a lot of other people would like to have seen an independent Kurdistan going from Erbil all the way to Syrian Kurdistan. I personally have a great sympathy for the Kurds. I can only say that historically they have been wronged. The U.S. Senate, the U.S. was supposed to have the League of Nations mandate over Kurdistan after World War I, and the U.S. Senate at the time decided, as President Trump has done now, that we should not have troops there to protect the Kurds. And it's a historic. I don't want to say wrong. History is not wrong. It just does what it does. But many people remember that. Many people remember that the Kurds should have gotten a state after World War I and didn't.
Okay, so now we're going back to World War I and the Kurds and what happened in one of the treaties that were made. I just got to ask you, Edward, what the hell does this have to do with us?
Really nothing. I am saying I think that President Trump, if I had been in his place, probably would have made the same move. I think it's time to get out. I don't think the Kurds are in a bad position. I think that the Syrian government is moving in. They're going to take control of the border. And if Erdogan decides to cross the border, he's going to have to deal with Russia. I think that was a move on President Trump's part that was very clever. He's now put the Turkish president face to face with Putin, President Putin. If he wants to cross him, it's at his own peril.
All right. So what happens now? Right. So the president sending Pence to Ankara to negotiate some kind of a ceasefire between the Kurds and the Turks. I guess from the beginning, the president was okay with the Turks meeting their border security objectives and resettling the 2 million refugees they have. He doesn't want the Kurds slaughtered. He doesn't want bloodshed. So what is the compromise here, Edward Yeranian?
I think that ultimately the Turkish president is not really going to get much of anything. I don't know what compromise he's going to get. I don't see it. I think President Putin is going to force him to pull out, and it may not happen right now. It may not happen in the next month, next 2 months. I mean, they've been vacillating over what to do in Idlib. But I think ultimately Putin said it. He said that any country that's occupying another country's territory needs to pull out. And I think he's pretty much stuck to that motto, that theory. We still have troops in Syria and at the Tenef border crossing. There is more of a legitimate reason to be there, if you want to call it a legitimate reason. We're blocking the main highway from Damascus to Baghdad and ultimately on to Tehran, if you want to go that far. But the argument, of course, is that we're trying to stop Iran from bringing rockets and other weapons all the way from Tehran to Lebanon.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What about the 2 million Syrian refugees that Turkey wants to place back in their country, which is a legitimate thing to want to do, right? I mean, you're in a country, you've got 2 million refugees. The state of Jordan's got, 1.5 million refugees. Both countries would like to get the Syrian refugees back to their country. How does that work?
I think it's slowly starting to happen, and every step towards the reconstruction of Syria, towards the stabilization of the country, is one step closer to having people going back. I've heard of people going back. I've heard of refugees leaving. I think that the real crux of the issue is whether they will be protected when they go back and whether the Syrian government will put them in jail. A lot of them fear that. I think it's the Russians that are going to have to make sure that that doesn't happen. And most of the refugees on Syrian soil ultimately will probably end up going back. I think that's what the bottom line is. They'll end up going back to Syria.
Well, if they're going back to Syria, I mean, they are refugees. They had to leave Syria because of the war. Civil war is coming to a close, right? One would think that they would want to go back to their homeland. Of course, there's a concern about what their safety is. But, I mean, if you're Assad, right, you've got to put the country back together. You can't just be slaughtering people because you're not sure of whose side they were on. So that's not going to work for them. And for the life of me, I don't understand what the neocons wanted Trump to do. I mean, just stay there, just put 10,000 troops in there as a buffer zone in perpetuity like we have in 10 other countries? I mean, what's the point of this? All they've done is scream about we're abandoning the Kurds and their slaughter. Nobody has articulated what the objective is long term. Not one of the neocons has said, here's the objective. Eddie Yeranian live, Cairo. Eddie, veteran correspondent, CBS News, Voice of America. Eddie, answer my question. What, if you follow the neocon, warmonger, military-industrial complex, Lindsey Graham plan, what the hell is their end game?
A complicated end game, John, and I don't think they spell it out because I don't think they think the people want to know what it is. I think their end game is to control large countries in the Middle East and to be able to rebuild, reconfigure the structure of the Arab world and other parts of the world as well, to build some sort of a new union and ultimately go on to some sort of regional Arab government that will interact with regional European governments, regional North American governments, and regional South American governments. I think ultimately that's their plan. But of course, if I say that too loudly, people will say it's a conspiracy theory. But I believe that's what their end game is. They're destroying Arab countries to rebuild the entire area under one roof and to merge it with other areas of the world.
Let freedom ring, right? Let's go into Iraq, and when we invade them, we're going to be looked as liberators, and they're going to be waving American flags, and we're going to have this great democracy bastion right in the middle of the Middle East, and everybody in the democracy is going to spread, and we're going to have they're all going to be westernized, and they're all going to buy American goods, and they're all going to have elections, and and freedom is going to ring out throughout the Middle East, and all we need to do is invade Iraq, topple their government, get rid of their Ba'ath Party, blame it on, I don't know, nuclear weapons or chemical weapons buried under the ground that didn't exist. Does all this sound familiar?
Yes, and I was against it at the time, and I even have myself on tape saying that on the radio network. But no one listens to people like me. I mean, I'm only giving you my commentary and my opinions, and they're willing to. Yeah, you do. They're willing to put out fake news in order to fulfill their goals. If they did it in Syria, these fake gas attacks, these red flag gas attacks, the media runs with them, and nobody stops them. You can't contest them, and they have a pretext for invading Syria. Fortunately, they didn't get away with it, but in Iraq they did, and they destroyed the country, and you see what happened.
You know why they didn't get away with it? Donald J. Trump. Period. Eddie, I'm telling you, as we're talking today, this one issue, getting out of Syria, and how he has stood up to the swamp and the neocons and the military-industrial complex, this one issue is going to get Trump reelected in 2020. Mark my words. John Fredericks Radio Network. Eddie Yeranian, you're the man. Live in Cairo. Thank you.